All right, so get this.
Okay.
Today's deep dive,
yeah.
we're looking at vultures.
Vultures.
Yeah, you heard right.
Wow.
It's from this blog post called The Wise Vulture and the Foolish Vulture, Lessons in Governance and Economy.
Interesting.
I found it on this blog called Small Steps. Their tagline is, Live for God, Lead for Nations.
Okay. Yeah.
Pretty interesting, huh?
Yeah, definitely catches your eye.
Yeah.
I mean, using vultures to represent, like, government officials and how they affect the economy is pretty bold. You don't usually see that. It's not like the usual eagle or lion you see in these metaphors.
Yeah, I know, right? Like, as soon as I saw the title, I was hooked.
Mm-hmm.
So the basic idea is this. Imagine a world where vultures are kind of like government officials.
Oh.
And live animals are businesses.
Okay, so I'm picturing like a savanna, but instead of lions, we have vultures circling around watching all the gazelles, the gazelle businesses down below.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so let's talk about the wise vulture.
Okay.
This vulture, gets that for the economy to be healthy, in this case, a good supply of resources, you need lots of live animals around.
Yeah, it's like recognizing the balance, right? Like within an ecosystem, the wise vulture gets that businesses need to do well so the economy can be healthy. They don't take too much all at once. They let those businesses grow and make more resources over time. It reminds me of sustainable taxation, and like how the government can make things good for businesses.
So you're probably thinking the Laffer curve right now.
Yeah, maybe.
And how getting that balance in taxes can lead to the best possible economic output. But why do you think they picked vultures to represent this idea?
That's a good question. That's what's really interesting here. Vultures, even though they have this kind of, grim image, they're really patient and efficient.
Yeah.
They just wait for resources to become available naturally, and they take only what's necessary. It's a lot like sustainable taxation, not taking too much so the whole system can keep going.
So they're not greedy predators. They're actually, vital for keeping things in balance.
Exactly.
Like a whole new way of seeing things.
It really makes you rethink the role of government in the economy. It's not just about taking. It's about making an environment where businesses can do well and contribute to the whole system.
Okay, so that's the wise vulture. But of course, there's got to be another side to this.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Enter the foolish vulture.
Right. The foolish vulture. They just want it all now. They devour all those live animals, the businesses, without thinking about what happens later. It's like classic short-sightedness that leads to disaster.
You can totally see how this plays out, right?
Yeah.
Scarcity kicks in.
Right.
The whole ecosystem collapses.
Totally.
And in the end, even the foolish vulture is in trouble because there's nothing left.
Exactly. It's sad because we see this happen over and over again in history. Think about price controls on important things. They're meant to help make things more affordable, but if they're set too low, they actually make it so producers don't want to make things anymore. Then there are shortages, and it ends up hurting the people the policy was supposed to help.
Yeah, it's a good example of how, even with good intentions, if you don't get how everything's connected, things can go wrong.
Exactly.
This whole idea of interconnectedness is one of the main lessons they're trying to teach to those 10th graders. But what does that actually mean? Can you give me a real-world example of how the government and businesses are linked?
Of course. Let's look at deregulation. Say the government cuts back on rules in the tech world. This could lead to new ideas and new businesses popping up everywhere.
Yeah.
But it could also mean less protection for consumers.
Uh-huh.
And that could lead to problems we don't even see coming. It's a complex web of actions and reactions. It shows why we need to think carefully and consider the long term.
Yeah, it's a great example. It shows how something the government does can have a ripple effect across the whole economy. It affects businesses, consumers, even future innovations.
Right. And that takes us back to the main message of the story.
Right.
The importance of smart and balanced governance. Understanding how government, taxes, and the business world all affect each other.
Yeah.
Recognizing that every decision can have big consequences.
Makes you wonder about that tagline, live for God, lead for nations.
Yeah.
It's like maybe they're hinting at something bigger. Like responsible economics is about more than just numbers.
Right.
It's about serving a higher purpose.
It's an interesting perspective to think about. Maybe the author is trying to connect those economic principles to ethical responsibility and making society better as a whole.
Definitely adds another layer to the whole thing. But we can't forget, this is aimed at 10th graders. It's trying to teach them some pretty important lessons about government and economics using this metaphor that they can understand. It's about making the economy grow by creating an environment where businesses can do well.
And it's about stressing how important it is to think long-term and develop things sustainably. Those are crucial lessons for future voters and decision makers.
Okay, let's pause for a sec and bring this back to you, the listener. You might be thinking, okay, all this wise vulture, foolish vulture stuff is interesting,
Yeah,
but what's it got to do with me?
right.
Well, I think there are some real takeaways here that can help all of us. It doesn't matter how old you are or what you do. So in part 2, we'll look at how understanding these principles can help you make better financial decisions and understand the world around you.
I'm looking forward to it. Back again. I'm really enjoying this deep dive.
Me too. We've gone from vultures and gazelles
Yeah.
all the way to price controls and deregulation.
Mhm.
Who knew a blog post for 10th graders could make you think so much?
Right. It makes you wonder, is this whole allegory too simple?
Yeah,
The real world is way more complicated than a savanna, right?
definitely. It reminds us that these models and metaphors are just representations. They're not reality itself.
Exactly.
Mm.
But even though it's simple, this story does highlight something really important.
Yeah.
How everything's connected, even things that seem separate, and how important it is to think about the long-term consequences of what we do.
Okay, but how does that apply to us? You know, in our everyday lives,
Yeah.
how can we use these lessons from the wise and foolish vultures to make better decisions?
Well, think about your own money.
Okay.
Are you more like the wise vulture,
Mm-hmm.
making smart investments, planning for the future?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you sometimes act like the foolish vulture,
Uh-oh.
spending impulsively, just going for instant gratification?
Ouch. That one hit a little close to home.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I'll admit, I've been known to make a few foolish vulture decisions when I see those online sales.
We all do it sometimes.
Yeah.
The important thing is to see those patterns and try to find that wise vulture balance.
Okay.
It's about thinking about the long-term health of your own personal finances, like it's an ecosystem.
So instead of buying that new gadget I should be thinking about how that money could grow if I invested it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Shifting your thinking from, I want it now, to what's sustainable in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
And this applies to more than just money.
Oh, yeah. Like, what?
Think about your health. Are you taking care of yourself?
Okay.
Exercising regularly? Eating healthy foods?
Yeah.
Those are investments that pay off over time.
Right.
Or are you always choosing the things that feel good right now but might be bad for you later?
Okay, I get it.
It's about making choices that keep your whole ecosystem healthy.
Yeah.
Your finances, your health, even your relationships.
Exactly.
Just like that wise vulture understands how everything's connected on the savanna,
Right.
we need to be aware of how our choices affect the different ecosystems in our lives.
So how do we get better at being like the wise vulture in our everyday decisions? Any tips?
One thing that can help is to ask yourself one simple question before you make a big decision.
Okay.
What are the long-term consequences of this choice?
So like taking a minute before I buy something on impulse or skip that workout.
Exactly. It helps you step back, look at the situation,
Yeah.
and decide if what you're doing matches up with your long-term goals and what you believe in.
Being intentional about our choices.
Yes.
Realizing that even small decisions can add up over time.
Absolutely.
And it's not about being perfect all the time.
Right. No one's perfect.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly. It's about striving for balance, recognizing that we're all always learning and growing.
I like that.
Remember that tagline from the blog, live for God, lead for nations? It got me thinking, could there be a spiritual side to this allegory?
Yeah.
Could the wise vulture represent something more than just good economic policies?
That's interesting.
Like maybe it's a symbol of being a good steward,
Yeah.
not just of money, but of our talents, our time, even our impact on the world around us.
That's a great point.
Maybe the author's saying that true leadership,
Yeah.
whether it's in government or our personal lives, comes from serving others and having a higher purpose.
That definitely adds another layer to the story
It does.
and makes us think about the ethics of what we choose to do.
Absolutely. And that reminds us of how powerful metaphors can be. They make us use our imaginations, question what we believe, and explore new ideas.
Speaking of imagination, remember when we were talking about different animals?
Yeah.
And how they could represent different economic systems?
Like the busy beaver for a more socialist approach.
Yeah, and the chameleon.
Right, the chameleon always adapting.
Yeah, for a more flexible economic model. That was fun, wasn't it?
It was. It got me thinking, if we can use animals for economic systems,
Yeah.
could we also use them to represent how we each handle money?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
If you had to pick an animal to represent your approach to money.
What would it be?
That's a tough one.
Yeah,
Maybe a squirrel, always saving up nuts for later.
a squirrel. It's like
But sometimes that can be a bit of a grasshopper, too.
That's a great example. We all have different tendencies. It's about knowing what they are and making choices that help us reach our goals.
So before we move on to part 3,
Right.
let's throw this question out to you, our listener. What animal best represents how you deal with money? Think about it. We'll be back after a short break to dive deeper into the wise and foolish vultures and see what else this allegory can teach us about ourselves and the world around us.
We're back. Hope you had fun figuring out your financial spirit animal.
Yeah, me too.
I'm still kind of torn between the squirrel and the grasshopper,
Yeah.
honestly.
They're
But
kind-
maybe that's okay, right? Like, maybe our financial personalities, they're
Okay.
kind of like our real personality.
Right.
Got different sides.
I think so too. We're not just one thing, are we?
Right.
Our money habits probably come from all sorts of things.
Yeah.
How we were raised, what we believe in, what's
Oh.
happening in our lives right now, what we want to achieve.
That makes sense. And it goes back to what we were saying before.
About how this allegory isn't like a perfect picture of reality. The real world of economics and finance.
Yeah.
It's a lot more complicated than vultures and gazelles on a savanna.
Absolutely. But even with that simplicity,
Yeah.
it gives us a good way to understand some basic principles, like the importance of balance, thinking long-term, and seeing how everything's connected.
Right. It reminds us that what we do has consequences, not just for us, but for the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to the blog itself.
Okay.
And who it's for 10th graders.
I know, it's interesting, right? The author chose this, well, unusual metaphor
Yeah.
to teach young people about economics, which can be kind of a dry subject.
Let's be real. When you're a teenager,
Yeah.
economics isn't exactly the most thrilling thing.
It's not always presented in the most exciting way,
Right.
but this blog post does something different.
Yeah.
It uses a story, a pretty strange one, to make people curious and get a point across about how economics works.
It's like sneaking in those important lessons by making it a fun story.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's really smart because when you can capture someone's imagination, especially when they're young,
Yeah.
you open up all these possibilities for them.
Right. It makes those ideas easier to understand and relate to. Instead of just memorizing stuff.
Right.
They're really thinking about the ideas, exploring the why behind the what.
And that's something we can all learn from, not just teachers.
Yeah.
If we want to communicate well, whether it's about economics or anything else,
Right.
we got to find ways to make it interesting and relatable.
Absolutely. Stories, metaphors, humor.
Yeah.
Those are all powerful tools. They can help us connect with people and make our message stick.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the wise and foolish vultures, I'm kind of left feeling impressed with the author of this blog.
Me too.
They found a creative way to teach kids about important ideas.
Yeah.
Ideas that will shape how they see the world.
And it reminds us all
Yeah.
to never underestimate the power of a good story. It can spark our curiosity, make us question things,
Yeah.
and inspire us to think differently.
Well said. And with that, we come to the end of our exploration,
Yeah.
but the conversation doesn't have to stop here.
Right.
Keep thinking about these ideas,
Yeah.
question things, and look for wisdom in unexpected places.
Because who knows, the next time you see a vulture circling, you might just think about economic policy, being a good steward,
Right.
and how all the systems that shape our world are connected.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those minds buzzing.